Hi, We Time Convo listeners. We have a special guest today.
Hi, I'm Lana.
Hi, Lana. Thanks for joining us. Today, we're talking about declining enrollment in our school district. It is more than just a numbers issue. It affects funding, resources, and overall quality of our education for our students. With fewer students, schools face closures, budget cuts, teacher layoffs, and a reduced program impacting learning opportunities. So, Lana, I've heard in San Jose, several districts are confronting the challenges of declining enrollment and budget deficits.
Yes. So I work at a charter school, and budget has been a big thing that they've talked about this year.
But isn't that a struggle every year, though, is the school budget?
It is, but also because of enrollment. There's a lower decline on enrollment, especially in the San Jose area. It's like really hard to recruit kids.
I'm just trying to understand, like, what is the factor of like this decline?
Like, people are moving out. I mean, it's too expensive for a family to live in San Jose.
So a lot of, like, in regards to students, there are just a lack of students.
Yeah, there's a lack of students. So we're a charter school, so it's not always easy to recruit students, right? Because in your district school, you know, the district home schools, that's where your kids go if you live in the neighborhood. But with charter schools, it's like a school of choice. So then you have to go and recruit other students to come to your school. And sometimes that's not the easiest depending on the grade. Especially, I feel like the middle school grades,
it's really hard.
Yeah, it's been
school, right?
Yeah, it's been more challenging. I think the lower grades we've been doing pretty well, but high school I think is a big one, especially with high school charter schools. It tends to be smaller, so they don't always get, you know, the life and the feel of what district high school is.
Yep, that's true. I mean, I remember it was very clear to me that I wanted Vanessa to be a charter school when she started. I felt like there was a good focus, good structure. And then as she was getting older, I felt like there were certain things that lacked in a charter school that a normal public school, a traditional public school had that a charter school didn't have, just because, again, they were still, it felt like they were figuring things out.
Yeah.
Part of it was regarding kind of like the extracurricular activities. So that was a huge factor for me in regards to having her transition from a charter school in elementary to, you know, once she was in high school, I just felt like she had a better opportunity presented to her in the traditional high school.
Yeah. Where I'm at like a tricky spot, right? I work at a charter school, but at the same time, I have kids who are like middle school, high school. And, you know, I think charter schools is a great foundation, and they learned a lot and there was a lot of structure. But, you know, I have boys, they have so much energy, and it's just like, I decided like, okay, a traditional high school would have been better for them, especially, you know, Dylan, he likes to play sports and he's active in those things. And although our charter schools do have sports, but it's not like competitive wrestling that he was into, right? Or like football, the things that he was into. So I had a tough choice to make that transition for him.
Yeah, you know, I'm very similarly aligned to kind of my thoughts when I was transitioning Vanessa out. So I was taking a look at San Jose Spotlight, and there's some stats there from the various school districts. And it's actually staggering to me. I didn't realize the effect of these budgets in these school districts. So, for example, Franklin McKinley School District, they are currently facing a $23 million shortfall. The district plans to close 3 of its 16 schools by the end of 2024 to 25 academic year.
Yeah. And this was surprising to me as well. Like, reading all of this information, I didn't know that these school districts were facing that much shortfall in the millions.
Well, that's kind of where I'm a little surprised, because how did it get to that point?
I'm not even sure. I know some districts like Alum Rock and Berryessa, they were suffering like low enrollment. And I think it has to factor in, like, it is really expensive to live in this area, right? And I feel like Berryessa is a really good school district in that area. But looking at the homes, Deb, they're really expensive. I can't imagine like trying to buy a home there and then sending your kids there. There was another one, Downtown College Prep, who they are a big charter school network. And I think they're from middle school to high school, I think. And last year they closed one of their schools. And by the end of this year, they're planning to close all 3 of the remaining schools.
So are you saying that Downtown College Prep, because I actually recognize that name, they will no longer be in existence?
No, they will no longer.
Oh, wow.
And remember, on Monterey, they used to have that lumber house. I think they took that over and they built a whole brand new building for DCP.
Oh my goodness.
I know. So I'm wondering, like,
what are they doing with that building now?
And so now we're getting a lot of phone calls from families trying to, enroll their kids in our school. But right now it's March, and we're technically almost done with the school year. So we try not to enroll kids because it kind of changes the dynamic in the classroom, right?
Yep.
And these parents, I feel so bad for them. They're trying to like figure out, like, where do I send my kids? Because our lottery has happened. So for next year, 25, 26.
It's kind of done.
Yeah. So now we have to put these families on a wait list, and it's just really sad.
Now, like you had mentioned, the strain is really on the elementary, but when we think about the junior high school population of students, that isn't as impacted.
I think it is also impacted now. I think seeing all these school closures, depending on, I want to say Berryessa, they are shutting one of their schools, but they're condensing their middle school kids to a different school. Depending on like the location, right? But Alum Rock, they have a lot of elementary schools that they're closing, I believe.
Yeah, it looks, again, we're looking at the district will close in Alum Rock 6 schools in 25 through 26 school year, with additional closures planned for the following year. So, and here's some stats. So I had mentioned in the Franklin McKinley, they're facing a $23 million shortfall. In Berryessa, it is about a $6 million budget deficit that they're facing for 25-26 academic year. In Alum Rock, they currently have a $20 million deficit and declining enrollment. So again, this is impacting them from having to close those 6 schools, and more to come.
Yeah.
So it's definitely, I mean, these are big numbers.
Yeah.
And, at the end of the day, I mean, there's a ton of questions on like what exactly happened to get them to that point. But what's really sad is at the end of the day, it impacts our students. And so, 2 things that come to mind is in regards to the academic performance. So research based on edweek.org indicates that students affected by school closures experience immediate decline in test scores, attendance, and graduation rates.
Oh, wow.
With some recovery occurs over time, the initial setback can be significant. The other thing in regards to the secondary impact to students is the long-term outcomes. So beyond immediate academic impacts, closures can lead to reduced college enrollment and lower lifetime earnings. This disruption and instability during formative years contribute to these long-term consequences. So these are pretty significant impacts to, and not in a good way.
No. And if you think about it, these are also the same kids that, remember during COVID, all these schools were shut down too. So they had that whole year and a half of not going to school. And then now imagine like they have to shift schools again because their school may be impacted and like closing, right?
Really? And we're only seeing like a sliver of what's happening here in our vicinity. I can't imagine how else other people are being impacted. Other locations are being impacted. I mean, we just talked about like 4 within our immediate vicinity. I mean, I'm sure that when expanded, it's.
I know crazy. In SF, they're also closing some schools as well. And not only just talking about like elementary, middle, high school, but like colleges are on the low decline of enrollment as well. Like I know when we were looking at colleges, SF State, they're low on enrollment, correct?
They are. And so that actually is one of the things that my nephew was encouraging me to look at because he actually works for SF State. Mm-hmm. He teaches there. And because it's a low decline, they are actually providing additional incentives for people to go.
Oh, wow.
One being if you live on campus, they were going to cut your, living on campus rate. So mm-hmm. I think it's something like by 20%. So again, encouraging, like, here's some of the benefits of going to the school because, there's a cost factor.
Yeah.
Right? Schooling is expensive. College is expensive. The educational system here in California, I think from a college perspective, it looks really great. Mm-hmm. But some students get really excited about like that look of going away, as far as they can. But that comes with a heavy price tag.
Yeah.
Like just going back to the decline, it doesn't sound like there's a really great fix.
I don't think so.
We all know time keeps going and that doesn't stop for anybody. So when these students who are impacted and they miss this time frame, mm-hmm. how are they set up for success in adult life? We're all part of society. We all get impacted. It's not like, oh, that doesn't matter to me because it's not my child.
Right.
No, we all get impacted by this.
And I'm wondering too, like these facilities, what do they do with them? Like the 6 schools that are going to close in Alum Rock, what do you do with all that facility?
Housing.
Oh, yeah. But then like who owns that? Does the district own it and then they rent it out? Like,
yeah, who knows?
Yeah.
I mean, just thinking about it, I'm like, oh my God, this is a huge problem.
Yeah, it is. And like, I was also thinking about like some areas like Evergreen, right? Mm-hmm. But I think they have like a decline on enrollment as well. And I'm wondering, does it have to do with like the next generation not having as many kids?
That could be as well. I mean, I know, like, I only have one. My parents had 3.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
So, for me, it's like, oh, that's already a decline right there, right?
Yeah. And our kids are saying they don't want to have kids. But, they may change their mind.
Yeah, but I don't think they're looking for a full household of kids.
Yeah.
I think they're good with 1 or 2.
Yeah. So I wonder if that factors into like the low end enrollment as well, right? Like
definitely
the next generation not having as many kids or kids at all.
Well, definitely that. Definitely the economy is a huge impact. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's people who just aren't good with being in California anymore. So they've moved. Expensive. They've been looking towards living in other states. They don't like some part of it is who knows.
No, I think it's been happening over time because like these districts, we've heard them going through like financial, deficit before. But then now I think it's really impacting them where they had to make that decision. And for a while, I think they were holding on to these schools, right? Hoping like, okay, maybe we can fill up the classes and we, hopefully like we can get out of this deficit. But $23 million is a lot of money. And I'm like, what happened? It could be as well, but then, DCP is a charter school. So, and they've been open for a long time, but yeah, I think it's both, right? It could be like charter schools having like the school of choice for families, because it's kind of like, if you have money, you probably would have sent your kids to private school, right? The education is just really different. And then like charter schools come in and, we probably took some of those kids, but it's not, it's really the parents' choice where they want to send their kids. And it could have been like anything. It could have been like all of that.
And so because of these schools closing, and it sounds like a lot of it is in the elementary.
It's like elementary, middle school now because DCP is closing. So it's middle school, high school, right? So I'm not sure about, so Franklin McKinley, those schools that they are closing are like the younger grades, right? And then Berryessa, I'm not sure, but in Alum Rock, I'm assuming it's a combination. And then DCP, it's like the middle school, high school. So it's impacting all the grades.
Wow. So when that happens, do they send a message to the parents like, here's some of the schools that you guys should be taking a look at?
So DCP did something like that where they're like, okay, they invited us to come over to talk to their parents and kind of like tell them like what our school's about to like help recruit those parents. And the other schools, we haven't really heard of anything. So I think with the other like home district schools, they're probably trying to get those kids into their own district schools, which makes sense.
Got it.
Our friend, she works in the Oak Ridge, I think, and her school had closed down a couple years back, and they had to consolidate those kids to a different school, and she ended up moving to teach at a different school.
So that's another question. Like, obviously, we have teachers and administrative staff and all these people to keep the school running. What happens to them?
Yeah. So district schools, I'm assuming they would let go of the newer ones, right? Versus like their veteran teachers. So
wow,
depending on what they have at their other sites, they probably would try to move them around.
Oh, wow. So this is impacting not just the students, but everybody.
Yeah. And teachers alone, it's really hard to find, right? Because they don't make enough money to live here.
Might be a little bit of a shortage.
Yeah. So I feel like we were always struggling to find like teachers because it's hard. It's hard teaching, and the amount of work that they do, they don't get compensated enough.
Oh, I remember they were there like before we showed up. And when we picked up our kids, they were still there.
Yeah.
And living in this valley is very expensive.
Yeah. And like, some parents, I mean, you and Irene have always appreciated the teachers, but I feel like some parents don't see how hard these teachers work. And I work with a lot of them. So it's like, I see the amount of work that they do, and they really love and care about these kids. Otherwise, they wouldn't do it, right?
Oh, I definitely.
Yeah. But I
can barely manage my own kid. I mean, I barely like my own kid sometimes.
Yes. I've talked to some people, they're like, well, they should be teaching that in school. The teacher should teach it. And I'm like, well, some of the stuff I think we should be teaching at home too, like certain things like manners, values, like things like that. Like, let's not put that all on the teacher, right? Yeah.
Oh, that's wild.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, this is, it doesn't sound like there's a really great solution.
No, it's really sad.
It's just happening.
Yeah.
Well, Lana, do you know anything that we can do? Like, as, listeners, is there anything that from a listener, whether you have a child or not, is there anything that, that we can do to kind of support or help?
I'm not even sure, like with these schools, it's, unless you are a part of that community, it's like, it's hard to tell, right?
Yeah. I mean, when I think about it, the long-term impact of this is just, it's going to affect all of us.
Yeah. And our kids.
Yeah.
Even though our kids are older now, it's going to impact them. And then like the future that they're going to have if they have kids, right? Yeah.
Wow. That's sad.
It is sad.
That's the thing, right? There's so many things that are happening in this world that you just are stretched.
Yeah.
And where do you focus on? But this is happening literally right here with us.
Yeah.
And it's going to have if you plan to live in this Bay Area, this is going to impact you somehow.
Yeah.
And so like, I don't know. It's just sad.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the hard part, right? Because I work at a school, of course I'm invested in, like, I do everything I can, but like as a parent, if your kids don't go to those schools, like, I don't know how you could really help unless you're in that community, right?
Yeah. And all I can say is, as a parent, it's hard because I know we have different priorities, and you know, the first priority is making sure our kids are safe, and making sure that they have food on the table and they have a roof over their head and they have clothes on their back. I think sometimes as parents, like you said, you know, you kind of have tunnel vision.
Yeah.
And you're not paying attention to like all this other stuff that is impacting your child until like you get the call and say, by the way, this is the last school year and, you know, you got to figure out where your child needs to go.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think as parents, it's probably good to check with your school to see like where they're going. That's another thing too. Like all schools, don't they have like a board meeting or like where things like because they need to provide transparency, because a lot of this is like, these are publicly funded.
Yeah.
And I've gone to a couple of board meetings at schools, and there is no representation of like any of the parents unless there was like a significant problem.
Yeah.
But for the most part, a lot of these board meetings, it's just there is no parents are there.
No, it's not. And like, you know, board members have a tough choice too, or like decision, right?
Yes.
In closing these schools, I'm sure it impacts everyone. They know that, but it's not like an easy decision either. But you're right. When we do go to board meetings, it's because it's like impacted in our community or our school alone. But I don't usually pick a board meeting to go to, like, hey, let's just go for fun, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
But I think that's another thing too, is us as parents, we do need to be a little bit more aware of what's going on, because I'm pretty sure that 23 million or whatever that deficit is did not happen over a year.
No.
It's happened throughout a couple of years.
Yeah.
And it's just unfortunate because like you said, you know, ours is actually moving on. So we kind of, you know, close our, like we are looking forward. We're not necessarily the impact of what's happening now, how that's going to impact like 5 years from now for the other students. So, it's unfortunate.
Yeah, it is.
Well, you know what would be a good segment, Lana, is like from the educational like perspective, people who are in there, like what are like the 5 things that like parents can do that's not going to cost you anything?
Yeah.
But this is going to be a huge impact to, your school. I think that would be an interesting conversation.
Yeah.
Is to like, you know, what are the 5 things that a parent can do right now?
And Liza would have a good perspective too, because she's at a district school.
They can do right now. It doesn't cost anything. Yeah, no. So just talking about what the declining enrollment and budget deficit, it's not stopping.
Yeah.
I think that's one takeaway for me is it's not stopping, and there's really no good answer. I think us as listeners, it's good to kind of like find out and be aware of like what's happening in your own district.
Yeah.
And seeing what you can do, especially for parents who, if you have kids in these districts, I feel for you. I really do. This is a tough journey, and there's really no great answer on how to solve it. So I feel for you guys.